Malvin Gray Johnson was an African-American artist who painted racially expressive and politically infused art from 1927 to 1934. Born in Greensboro, North Carolina on January 28, 1896, Johnson's family, like many other African-American families at the time, migrated north to New York City as a part of the New Negro movement. This movement was caused by African-American families wanting to get away from the racist society of the South. New York City, in particular Harlem, gave African Americans an opportunity to reinvent themselves, to establish a new African American identity that broke away from past stereotypes. Taking place in Harlem during the 1920s to mid-1930s was a cultural, social, and artistic advancement called the Harlem Renaissance. During this period, Harlem was a cultural hub for African American artists, writers, musicians, and scholars who looked to make a name for themselves, in particular Malvin Gray Johnson. From a young age, Malvin Gray Johnson dreamed of being an artist. His family, however, had little money to send him to school. He worked until the age of 25, in which he had saved enough money to enroll in 1 year of school. Johnson enrolled in the National Academy of Design in New York City. There, he learned proper academic painting techniques, which allowed him to develop his own artistic style. After graduating, Johnson began his career in the fine arts. Throughout his career, I argue that Johnson's art was racially expressive and politically infused for the context of the time. After graduation, Johnson, like many African-American artists, struggled to sell his artwork. This is because much of the artistic community was run by white patrons and academic institutions who had no interest in the artworks of a black man. This is until a man named William E. Harmon created the Harmon Foundation, an organization created to reward African-Americans in the fields of business, education, fine arts, literature, music, race relations, religious services, and science. This organization held African-American only art exhibitions, which Malvin Gray Johnson competed in and achieved greatly. Malvin Gray Johnson specialized in creating oil paintings known as spirituals. Spirituals are paintings or drawings based off of religious songs. This particular painting by Johnson is called Sweet Low, Sweet Chariot, based off of the religious folk song, Sweet Low, Sweet Chariot. This painting is one of Johnson's greatest achievements, winning him first place at the Harmon Foundation exhibition in 1929. This painting has many social, religious, and political implications. Sweet Low, Sweet Chariot depicts slaves after a long day of work. The aspect of leisure and relaxation was something that was never given to slaves, so therefore, Johnson depicts them resting here. The water also has many political interpretations, but however, it references the gap between African Americans and freedom during this time. The clouds appear as almost a godlike figure. The slaves are holding their hands to the heavens, praising their God. This religious association plays off of the moral paradox that African Americans had with Christianity at the time. Christianity was taught to slaves by their white slave owners to keep them more docile and obedient, to prevent slave uprisings. Down by the Riverside is another spiritual created by Johnson. This is based off of the religious folk song, Down by the Riverside. Once again, Johnson uses only black subjects in his work. The black man appears to be resting by the river, playing off of the irony that slaves were never allowed to be lazy. Johnson once again uses the political association with water, as if the man is looking at the gap between him and his political freedom. Johnson also excelled in other types of paintings called self-portraits. There are many ironic and political implications in this painting. Johnson draws himself in his art studio, which appears to not have any art supplies in it. The cramped room represents the American society. By constricting and limiting African Americans' advancement, the U.S. society has prevented him from achieving his goals. In another self-portrait called Negro Soldier, which is a part of a series that Johnson was working on before his death. This series represented the African American achievements in America. Here, he depicts an African American soldier, which represents the success and achievements of African Americans through military service. This painting was completed in 1934. The time period that this painting is done in is very important for the political relevance of the painting. During the 1920s and 1930s, public lynchings were commonplace in the southern United States. In particular, Johnson wants to reference the lynchings of African American veterans who returned home from World War I who were hanged in their military uniforms.